Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube. I'm Louis Cipher, and this is the Devil's Advocate Debate Club. Welcome back. I apologize that my videos have been a little bit scattered and not as frequent as I would like of late, as I am currently not monetized on YouTube. My following just isn't big enough yet. I can't start doing this for a living or putting money towards it, and I've been spending most of my time just making sure the rent is paid. That being said, I wanted to share a little bit more of the snow with you guys and talk a little bit about the ethics of begging for money online as a living, and maybe a little bit about free speech. Now, I do think that everyone should give back to society with whatever profession they choose in life. Now, if you don't, it's certainly your choice. You don't have to, but personally, I've always had a drive to do something with myself and could never figure out what. I've always been good at researching things online and at debating people's online, but I never really saw any real benefit to society. So let's talk about the benefit of public discourse and the importance of free speech. Public discourse is how things get decided before they get put into the law books. See, things change socially faster than they change legally, which means something that becomes socially unacceptable but is still legally acceptable will often follow in the law. Part of the reason of this is because public discourse happens. People are able to express and share their opinions with one another, and as such, the strongest opinions flourish. People change their minds. Not everyone. Some people are stubborn and stuck in their ways, but through public discourse, it's my belief that if allowed, the best ideas will emerge as the strongest. This is why it starts getting dangerous when you put limitations on this public discourse. Now, I'm speaking mostly from a perspective of American law. I do know that the limitations on freedom of speech are actually much greater in the rest of the world. Basically all of it, as far as I can tell. In America, however, you do have a semblance of free speech. As long as you're not inciting people to violence or, creating a panic by doing something like the classic example is yelling fire in a crowded movie theater, you should be fine. But let's look at that last example for a second. If someone runs into a movie theater and yells fire, what do? Are you an animal? Do you panic? Do you get up and stampede with the rest of the sheep towards the exits? Or do you sniff the air, look around, see if there's an immediate threat to your person, and leave calmly like a person would? Direct incitements to violence, such as saying, hey, all of you go hit this guy, absolutely. I feel that those should be illegal. They are very, very close to violence themselves. But I think even America, which has some of the least stringent free speech laws on the books, might take things a step too far. Because I don't think that people should be coddled. I think that people should be expected to think for themselves, to act on their own thoughts and beliefs, and to be held responsible for them as an individual. So, more and more, we're seeing people placing limits on free speech. The legal limits haven't started so much in America as they have in other countries, but the social limits, which are likely to lead into those legal limits if not stemmed, have begun. Of course, I'm talking about social media. Recently, Joe Rogan has done a couple of podcasts with Twitter's CEO, Jack Dorsey, I believe. The most recent one with Tim Pool on, as well as I can't remember her name, but the head of Twitter's trust and safety team. And it was absolutely fascinating to hear the complete hypocrisy in Twitter's policies. They say that they want to push forward and protect freedom of speech, and yet they put policies in place specifically to, regulate it more strictly than the law does. It just seems kind of counterintuitive to the overall goal Dossie states for it being a free speech platform, something he had said years ago but recently restated in this podcast. So the dangers of restricting speech on social media are, there's many, but there are two that I'd like to talk about. One is, as I had mentioned, the fact that these restrictions can start becoming law, that social changes and adjustments can lead to legal changes if they are widely accepted. Most people aren't on Twitter. It's only the sixth or so largest social media platform when you look at active users. Facebook is far larger, and there are lots of people who don't use social media whatsoever. I know that's hard for a lot of us online to believe, but it's not nearly the bastion of social change people think it is. See, for something to change legally from a social change, it needs to be accepted by, generally speaking, the majority, at least in a democracy. Twitter is the majority of the news coverage which social media gets. All of the major outlets cover things happening on Twitter because all of the major reporters tend to be on Twitter and follow each other there. But this is simply not a representative sample of what the rest of the people think. And so by taking all of our reporting from a place like Twitter, and Twitter beginning to implement rules on free speech that go above and beyond legal regulation, it leads to the media pushing for Twitter's policies to become America's policies. And you see places where, like in California, misgendering has become a crime in certain sections. And it is dangerous to let a small but very vocal minority of the population have this much social influence through our media. The other reason why it's dangerous to put these limitations on public discourse is, unless you're just killing these people or locking them away for their beliefs, something which I am 100% against, then they are just going to find each other, talk, and form groups of their own. And by banning more and more things and using the Nazi word more and more to describe a broader and broader variety of people who are basically just in the center politically, you end up with, as Tim Pool was talking about in the recent podcast, groups being shunted to the sites that will accept them. I'm on Twitter, but I'm also on Gab and on Minds. And I can tell you that it's very, very interesting to see the groups of people who have been ostracized and banned from Twitter for different reasons coming together and starting to talk. Because on Gab, there aren't a lot of people with more left-leaning or centrist views. It is a very right-leaning site currently, though there are people on it in both directions. And so when someone from the center-left gets banned from Twitter and winds up going to Gab because it's one of the only social media platforms that'll accept them, and because they've heard, as Gab advertises, that they won't be banned for what they're saying, they end up being exposed to lots of these, Nazi ideas that are banned from Twitter because they have no other place to go. And it leads to echo chambers just like the ones on Twitter, and just as extreme, but taken to the other side. if we let the Nazis stay on our platforms, if we let the Nazis keep using Twitter, and I use them because they have, in my opinion, a horrible view on life, but if we keep letting the people with all of the bad opinions use the social media platforms that we do, that means they're not hiding in the dark. Bad ideas will stay in their corners and fester until they grow powerful enough to actually mean something, if we let them. However, if we shine a light on them and keep them in our public discourse where we can respond to them, a lot of times these ideas can be destroyed through debate. You can take these extremists and talk them down back into functioning members of society before they do anything extreme. Lumping them all together in echo chambers like Gab by banning them from other platforms does nothing but help to radicalize the people that you see as your opposition, in the same way that blocking everyone on Twitter who disagrees with you is a good way to self-radicalize yourself into an echo chamber. And, the echo chambers on Twitter, I don't actually think that they're Twitter's fault. I don't think that it's been doing a lot to foster them other than some of the more right-wing bans. For the most part, people are doing that to themselves on Twitter. So, this is getting a bit long and ranty, but try not to let yourself get into an echo chamber. If you find yourself using a social media platform, or if you find your feed is filled with one type of opinion or with people who agree with you politically, go out of your way to follow a few people who don't. You might learn something, and if not, you might teach them something. Continuing to push each other away into little corners and echo chambers does nothing but radicalize the